All right, guys, let's talk about money, okay? Because some of us are about to get some money, okay? Because of the Joe Biden America Rescue Plan, all right? Now, this plan, right, $1.9 trillion has a lot of people in the investment industry, the financial services industry, Republicans concerned, okay? They're concerned about inflation, okay? Because we have racked up a record amount of debt in the last year. We're printing money, right, almost endlessly. Jerome Powell, the chair of the Federal Reserve, is basically money printer go burr, right? So with this happening, again, the concerns of inflation are rising. And guys, inflation happens when there's an increase in the money supply, right? An amount of dollars circulating through the economy from a monetary, which means the actions of the Federal Reserve, and a fiscal, right? Which means the actions of the government taxing and spending standpoint. Okay, we have a ton of money circulating in the economy relative to the goods and services provided, right? And what happens is that when you have too much of it, then you start to see prices rise over time, right? And when prices go up, that's when people experience what we call inflation, right? Prices go up. Now, Rand Paul has been sounding the bell on this basically since the beginning of his career, but especially now, considering that, you know, we're going to put $1.9 trillion more into a, some would say, pretty good economy, right? We had a record jobs report in which we created 375,000 new jobs. The unemployment rate, I think, now is about 6.2%, down from, I think, 10 to 13% at peak, right? And basically, we need to get back to 3%. So we need to cut it in half in order to get to where we were pre-pandemic. So some people, like Kevin O'Leary, would argue that when you already have a pretty good economy, like, right, we're projected to see pretty good growth numbers, okay? You have lower and lower unemployment, and now you have $1.9 trillion going into that already pretty good economy, which has been closed down, but is on the verge of opening up. We may see a large spike in spending, okay? We may see the economy overheat, which again can contribute to causing inflation, right? That is the argument from those like Kevin O'Leary, okay? However, there's some that basically are only concerned about unemployment, making sure that we can get unemployment back to where it was before the pandemic and let all the other chips fall where they may. That's the main concern. And basically, this is the goal of the dovish Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, who's basically said that her main goal is to get the economy back to full employment, right? And this is not a surprise to those who understand Janet Yellen's philosophy. Again, she's a dove, which means that she cares more about employment when it comes to policy than actual inflation, okay? That's what she cares about. She's more concerned about the economy getting to full employment, right? If that costs a little bit of inflation, that's fine. Now, on the other hand, hawks believe that inflation is the number one concern, right? And they want to try to keep inflation at a reasonable rate, right? And people generally agree below 2% is historically kind of where we want to be, right? Like the sweet spot year over year. Now, to be clear, Janet Yellen was a dove when it came to monetary policy, which is actions of the Federal Reserve, which really applied when she was chairman of the Federal Reserve. Now that she's Treasury Secretary, she is more responsible for fiscal policy, which is government tax and spending. Now, it is said that Janet Yellen is a fiscal hawk, which in 2018, she basically said that she was very concerned about the U.S. debt. If she could wave a magic wand, that she would raise taxes and cut retirement spending, which basically would mean that she would never win any election, right? Because Democrats and Republicans would hate that, right? Although, as libertarians would say, if you're really concerned about the debt and the deficit, right? If you're really a fiscal conservative, then you should probably raise taxes and cut spending, okay? Or I don't know, maybe libertarians wouldn't vouch for the raising taxes, but really at the end of the day, I mean, if you are serious about taking care of the debt, you're gonna have to increase revenue and cut spending at the same time. That's just what it is. And anybody that's not saying that is not really serious about cutting the debt. So up until now, Janet Yellen and Jerome Powell have basically tried to downplay the concerns of inflation. However, investors are not necessarily buying it. Okay, they're not buying it. That's why we've seen some volatility in the marketplace where a lot of growth stocks are getting hit, right? And we're getting into more money shifting into more cyclical stocks because investors are concerned about inflation, right? So the question is, will inflation occur? Will it rise, right? Will we get some inflation long term from these stimulus packages? And I'm going to present both sides of the argument and you guys can decide for yourself. But before we get in that, my name is Greg Foreman and you're watching A Black Conservative Perspective. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share A Black Conservative Perspective, aka a leftist worst nightmare. You can also follow me on Twitter at GForemanBCP. Let's get it. All right, guys. So we're gonna listen to Kevin O'Leary, who is a famous Shark Tank investor, businessman, you know, pretty famous guy, right? For, you know, the kind of the way he goes about business. Okay, he's gonna give his opinion on the inflation issue, and then I'm going to go over Janet Yellen's arguments regarding inflation and then kind of go from there. So let's check out what Kevin O'Leary had to say on CNBC.
Kevin, help me with this. I don't disagree with you on the idea of wanting to do this more precisely. I think everybody wishes that you could actually, you know, with like a laser beam, just get the money to the most vulnerable people. But if I told you that the system is not created in a way that allows for that, is this an acceptable way to do it?
No.
If you can't do it in the most precise way that I know we all wish.
Andrew, the average salary in America, $52,000 to $60,000, depending on region. Why are we sending gainfully employed people checks? Why in the world would you ever do that when there's people unemployed that are really hurting? Give them more money. Don't fund people that are already employed. This economy is probably going to run at a 7 to 8% GDP, and we're sprinkling money out of a helicopter down to people that are already employed. That's too blunt an instrument. It's way too wasteful. And the risk of inflation becomes a big factor. That hurts everybody. You just can't do this again. We did this already in the first PPP program, which I now think was 60% wasted. I don't want to do it again. Money to people that are unemployed, money for the logistics of vaccinations, that's it. The economy is going to come back screaming. It doesn't need any more stimulus, please. And by the way, there's tons of infrastructure spending in here. Amtrak, another $1.5 billion. They haven't even spent the first $1 billion. Why is that in this bill anyways? What does that have to do with COVID? There's so much non-COVID related stimulus in this. It's a horrible, horrible piece of legislation. And I think every American should read it. It's just full of waste.
All right. So I actually think that that is a pretty decent argument from Kevin O'Leary. Okay. Now, I do support stimulus. However, I will say I do wish it was more targeted. Right. And the reason why is because of inflation. Now, right now, historically, guys, I mean, at least for the last 10 years, you know, inflation has been under control. It's been under 2%. However, the markets are signaling that investors are concerned about inflation, okay? Because bond yields are going up, which means people are selling their bonds. Why are people selling their bonds? Because they feel that interest rates are going to go up because of inflation. When inflation goes up, the government has to increase their interest rate to compensate investors for the loss in the value of their money during periods of high inflation, which means the government has to raise interest rates. Raising interest rates also helps suck money out of the economy because investors are going to park their money in more safe securities like bonds that are going to be paying higher rates of interest, right? They would rather have the trade-off of basically risk-free investment, right? If you trust the full faith and power of the federal government, which, you know, a lot of libertarians don't, right? But essentially, they see that as a risk-free investment, right? And you're going to get a guaranteed amount of money from it, right? So they see that as a better trade-off than putting their money in the risky marketplace when they know they can get a guaranteed rate of return, theoretically risk-free. which takes money out of the market and it encourages saving. And when you pull money out of the economy, that helps cool it down. Remember, inflation comes from an overheating economy, taking money out of the economy, right? When there's too much money circulating into the economy is what happens when you raise interest rate. That's what the government's trying to do. They're trying to take money out of the economy to control inflation, right? So if that happens, as a bond investor, why would you want to be invested in these bonds with these historically low interest rates when you already know or you expect inflation, which means that the government is going to have to increase interest rates in the future, right? And this is what caused treasury yields to increase, right? Which causes a lot of investors to pull out from the stock market. Okay, a lot of growth stocks took a beating, right? Your favorite tech stocks, you know, these highly speculative stocks of companies that don't really make money, like Tesla, you know, SpaceX, some of these other companies, right? These companies have stock values have taken a huge hit because when inflation rises, the valuations of these companies, because their future cash dollars are not as valuable anymore, goes down, right? And you have investors kind of pulling money out of the market and putting it in places that they feel is more safe, right? So it's really like a domino effect. And we're seeing all this happen, and that means that the market is signaling that they believe inflation is on the rise. Now, Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, has come out and basically said he expects some inflation, right? Like a spike in inflation, but it's going to smooth out over long term. They don't really expect inflation to rise. Now, again, this initial statement is what kind of spooked investors in the market. Kevin O'Leary, right, what he was just telling you, are probably one of those people that heard that and became highly concerned about inflation, like a lot of other people in the market. So Janet Yellen, whom you remember, guys, I told you she was a dove, which means she's more concerned about full employment rather than inflation, comes out and basically walks back some of those statements that Jerome Powell was making in regards to inflation, right? She comes out and she basically dismisses concerns about inflation fears with the COVID-19 relief package. So let's read here in terms of what she said. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said Monday that she doesn't believe fears of rising inflation or unemployment resulting from the Democrats' $1.9 trillion COVID-19 relief package are warranted. Speaking with MSNBC host Stephanie Ruhle, Yellen argued that the stimulus package, expected to be passed by the House and signed by President Biden in the coming days, would not pour too much gas on the U.S. economy, causing prices of goods to rise. Quote, I don't really think that is going to happen. We had a 3.5% unemployment rate before the pandemic, and there was no sign of inflation increasing. She said, adding that the administration has the, quote, tools to reduce inflation if experts believe it will become a problem. The former Federal Reserve chair also said she believes the U.S. will return to full employment by 2022 should the administration's plans proceed. Quote, I am anticipating, if all goes well, that our economy will be back to full employment where we were before the pandemic next year. And the Congressional Budget Office estimated that without this, it would probably take until 2024. Janet Yellen, who has said that, you know, the Biden administration should act big, right, and pass commentary about the stimulus, right, because of interest rates being at a historic low, right? That means the cost of borrowing money for the government is at a historic low. She's been very supportive of big spending, even though she's known as a fiscal hawk. But it seems like in this situation, she's thinking more along the lines of how she'll be thinking from a monetary policy standpoint. All that fiscal hawkness seemed to have gone out the window, right? Okay. Again, her main concern, guys, is for employment of the economy. Now, she says she expects that to happen by 2022, which to me signals that once full employment of the economy happens, I would expect interest rates to probably start going back up, right? One. But the question is she right about inflation? Because somebody that's a dove that doesn't really care as much about inflation, right, versus full employment of the economy, I'm not sure if I can necessarily trust her on her expectations for inflation, considering how it's not at the top of her list of concerns in regards to how much money we have circulating in the economy right now, right? So I'm a little skeptical of Janet Yellen, and I understand why the market is skeptical of her, right? Like, can we really believe what Jerome Powell says at this point, right? So, you know, again, that's why we're seeing some weariness in the marketplace. However, in Janet Yellen's defense, she probably thinks that a lot of money that's being pumped into the economy is just going to go back into debt service, which right now in, you know, certain sectors of the economy, we have, you know, record high debt service. So I think that she probably believes that the rate at which this money is going to get absorbed right into debt service is probably going to be high enough that we don't see inflation. At least I believe that's probably her argument. Okay. And that's probably what she's thinking. So we will see, right? All that's to say, we will see. I just want to bring this to you guys' attention because this is the primary concern of this stimulus package from Republicans is whether or not this will cause inflation, right? Are we spending too much money? Because Biden is going to have another infrastructure package coming down the pipeline with possibly more stimulus money, right? And I think Kevin O'Leary does have a point, like, you know, we have too much, like we need to stop, right? Like we need to chill out. Ideally, we made this package more targeted, but it didn't happen. But I would say moving forward, I would, if I was the Biden administration, they should chill out on the spending and just let's wait, see what happens with inflation and go from there, right? Give some time for the money to actually be used in some way. Because a lot of people are just saving their stimulus checks. They're putting it right back in the markets. Again, like, you know, I think Janet Yellen expects they're paying off debt. You know, let's see if the money is actually going to get in the economy. Let's see what happens and then go from there. But we'll see what happens, guys. Let me know what you guys think. I thought it'd be fun and maybe do a finance video for you guys and mixed in with some politics. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.